Well, welcome everyone. My name's Elaine Koyama. I'm going to start us off on the Nikkei Write Now um, program. We're 3 years later after having attended one of Alden's first classes. We'd like to share our experiences of forming a group after Alden's session. We felt so strongly to continue the experience, and the group started out. What we're going to cover is kind of the nuts and bolts of how our group formed. How did we start? What did we gain? What have I given? How much time does it take? Some of the nuts and bolts. We have lots of times for Q&A. If you have questions you'd like to post, there's always chat that we'd like you to feel free to use at any time. So before we get started, I'd like to have the group introduce themselves. We should be pinned onto your screen so that you see us, but we'll use this slide as the intros will go in this order. So I'll start us off. My name's Elaine Koyama. I am a Sansei, grew up in Montana, went to school in California. I've lived in Minnesota for a bazillion years, I think longer than I am old, but about 40 years, and recently moved to New Mexico. I'm currently working on a historical fiction based on the internment camps and my mother's diaries. So it's a love story based in the Gila camp and on the Tulare Assembly Center. So that's me. Ellen, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alden Hayashi, and I'm a Canadian Sansei, and I'm coming to you from a little island, Nekhlelahom, which is in Squamish Territory near Vancouver. And yeah, I'm the author of the inspired organization, Spirituality and Energy at Work, and co-author of Healing the Heart of the World, Harnessing the Power of Intention to Change Your Life and Your Planet. And currently I'm researching and writing a book on my family's history and really looking at what does it mean to a family who's on all sides of the war. So my family on both sides were incarcerated in the concentration camps in the interior of British Columbia. And my grandfather's youngest brother was within 500 meters of the hypocenter of the Hiroshima bomb, while their brother and my grandmother's sister, so they were married, were living in the United States, who, of course, dropped the bomb on our family. And so what does that actually mean in terms of things like intergenerational trauma and implications for really the path that we're treading right now in terms of humanity, and what have we learned and where do we go from here? Thanks. Gloria.
I'm Gloria Kumagai, and I'm a Sansei who was born, raised, and still living in Minnesota. And I'm presently working on developing some strong writing habits. They said it takes 3 weeks to develop a habit, but it's taking me a little longer. And so part of that is making myself do some writing each day, and I'm focusing on my life experiences. Grace?
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see you. I'm Grace Morizawa. I live in Berkeley, California. I grew up in the high desert of Eastern Oregon, Ontario, Oregon. So a lot of my poems, that's the setting, because it is a very magical place to live in the high desert. And I write poetry. And I am a Sansei. My parents met in Heart Mountain. And Lisa.
I'm Lisa Johnson Ponder. I'm in Eugene, Oregon. I was born in Chicago, where I thought I had no connection with Nikkei world, because I am not Nikkei. My family is not. And I was so wrong, because as I've become an author, a writer, investigating as a historian, I've discovered Chicago is right in the thick of it. So no wonder my, good friend in third grade was Clyde Okita in Chicago. My connection here is that I went to Alden's sessions 2 years ago, to learn if there was a way for me to have a Nikkei group to write with and learn with. I'm in Eugene, Oregon, where I helped create the Eugene Japanese American Memorial. I helped design it, and I was a stone carver carving it, and my background is in law and history and art, and they all combined. And then when this memorial plaza went in downtown, I heard lots and lots of stories, personal stories, and I wanted to make sure those got preserved. So now I'm writing a book where I'm interviewing people whose names I carved on these plavers and finding out what their family story is, whether they were Nikkei or non-Nikkei and just an ally, and preserving a lot of connections. Sometimes I'm able to go back 3 generations and forward 3 generations, but usually for each of these entries, I'm doing a shorter thing, but preserving part of what Alden calls the tapestry of Nikkei culture and history. So that's my entry into this world. Lori, you're next.
Okay. It's really, really gratifying to see how many of you have joined us tonight. And I'm noticing Paul, Tomita, and I think his wife, who I met on the Tule Lake pilgrimage quite a few years ago. I was drawn to this group not knowing who would be in it and what it would be like, because I have always loved words, loved writing, have written like Alden for everybody else, about everything else, but never for myself or about me. And so I thought I would test it out. And I've been so gratified, surprised, joyful about what it's brought up to the surface in me, and how my imagination about writing has expanded and grown. I wrote a short piece called The Brown Blouse, and it was a story that I had heard my mom tell me for as long as I can remember. And I read it to my group first, before anybody else, before even my mom. And I was encouraged to send it out into the world, but I felt that I couldn't do that until I read it to her. And so on Valentine's Day, I read it to her. And she said it felt like a love letter. So I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And yeah, this is very fun to be with you all. And last but not least, Sarah.
Hi, I'm in Arlington, Massachusetts, which is right near Boston. I was checking as some of you were coming in where you're from. I don't see anyone else on the East Coast, but maybe I just missed that. I'm a Yonsei on my father's side of the family. So I'm Hapa, a half Japanese, and I came to Nikkei Write Now because mainly I heard this piece on NPR about pilgrimages to camps, and this was during the pandemic in 2020. And I had no idea that pilgrimages existed, and I was fascinated, but I couldn't, go on one since it was 2020. And so that was how I found out about Tadaima having an online conference, and I went to Alden's class, Alden Hayashi's workshop, and loved it, and then wanted to keep going, and so did as part of this group. In my workday life, I'm a special ed teaching assistant at a diverse public elementary school. I have 2 teenage daughters, and a husband and a dog. So I don't have a lot of time for anything besides work and family, except the only thing I haven't let go is Nikkei Write Now, because this group is really important to me, and I feel like I learn alongside the other members about the Nikkei experience. One of my two writing goals are, I've always wanted to write a book for kids. So I'd love to do that. I've researched writing about different Nikkei heroes, but I'm not sure. I did workshop a story with this group, which people were super helpful about. I also really want to preserve my own family stories. I'm partially motivated because I waited too long to ask my grandparents and my parents even about their lives. And now I'm so frustrated that I can't get the answers that I want about their stories. So I'm trying to preserve stories so that, my family, my younger family members will have something if they become curious at some point. So very happy to be here with you all. And now Ellen is going to tell us about why we named our group Nikkei Write Now.
So yeah, why Nikkei? The term Nikkei is defined as Japanese immigrants and their descendants who have created communities throughout the world. And so therefore it encompasses all people of Japanese ancestry, regardless of generation, place, or country. And in our group, I'm the outlier or part of the diaspora that's in Canada. And we're intergenerational to the extent that Sarah's a Yonsei. And so it's really lovely to have a diverse group, and I would encourage that. So some of the comments, so Lori had said that Nikkei was not a term that she was actually familiar with, but she loves it because it's all encompassing, and we have such a wide variety of group members, and we all have, of course, unique family histories that are really inclusive of Americans and Canadians and Japanese nationals and non-Japanese who are connected, to the culture and our experiences. And Elaine said that one of the most interesting facets of this group is that while we all share Japanese ancestry in some way, our backgrounds differ a lot more than she thought they would. And we've been together now for 3 years. And so I think we're getting into, and over those years, of course, our relationships have deepened, and, we've listened to, we've heard stories, family stories, and it just gets juicier over the years. And so it really is delightful to be in such a diverse group that reflects the various, experience, the unique and beautiful, and sometimes sad and tragic experiences of our ancestors, and just, the implications for our lives. And what a great way to tell some of these stories that haven't been told before. Next, Grace. So how did we start?
Yeah, I'm here to talk to you all a little bit about how we started. But before I start, I recognize a lot of you because you were in Alden's writing group this year. And some of you, just raise your hand if you were in any of the writing groups for Tadaima this year. I want to see who was here. Okay. Okay, it's great to see all of you. Well, our group started right here in Tadaima in Alden's workshop, online. We never saw anyone in person, although some of us have now seen, after 3 years, we've seen each other. We're all surprised. I think people are also surprised that I'm so short. But anyway, every time we get together, we learn something new. And like today, when Sarah was talking about her grandparents, it was such a big statement to me because I have heard her struggle to write about her grandparents' experiences. So even in our conversations, things get deeper and richer because now I know the background and what she wants to say and what she doesn't know and doesn't want to say. And so, but anyway, all of you who are in Alden's workshop know that we engaged in a workshop process where we shared our work and gave feedback to each other. And I feel like he just made this rich broth for us as Nikkei writers to stretch our creativity and get critique from fellow Nikkei. Also, we don't have to explain what we mean by the word camp, and that's a real big relief to me. And well, we could explain it, but also Alden is a published writer. So that was kind of a thrill in itself to hear what he thought and his suggestions to everyone's writing. So we were, I hope, like you, inspired by the many accounts of stories, historical fiction, poetry, nonfiction, and the opportunity to have a Nikkei writer as an audience. I can't stress how supportive it is to be in an audience where we may not have exactly the same culture, but here in North America, because Ellen is from Canada, we have many similar experiences regarding ourselves in a basically Caucasian culture. Now, even though it is now more diverse. So when Alden asked us, do you want to be a writing group? We jumped in. And as Ellen said, there were around 13 or 14 of us. And we were really different. We were desperate. We were beginning writers. We were novelists ready to publish. We were a poet. We were a biographer. And we wrote for different reasons, to tell our family's history, to talk about the community, to complete a biographical project or manuscript for publication. So we were not only were we spread across the country, but we were spread across in our hopes and expectations as writers. So when we met, we were kind of floundering. I think Ellen came to our first meeting, introduced us, and left. But luckily, at that time, we had someone who works for the writing project in California, the Bay Area Writing Project, and working with teachers in writing who knew how to do writing groups. So she started us off for a few of the first meetings, just writing, talking about a prompt, and preparing us with a fairly engaging prompt. And then we just wrote and shared. And that was good because you know what? When you write and share your writing, you get to know each other in a deeper and a way you don't from just the conversation. You get to know each other quickly. But of course, for some of us, just a time to write was enough. We needed that to keep going as writers. And for others, they were ready, they were chewing out the bit to go on to another level and get published. So we kind of struggled, like, how are we going to put those two things together? So we tried to mesh it all together in one session, like we'd write to a prompt for 30 minutes, share that, and then we'd have people share their manuscripts and we'd try to give response. Everything felt rushed and was kind of not too satisfying, but we kept at that in that process for quite a while. Also, at the same time, our group diminished. We also had someone come in just through word of mouth, I think, who was with us for a year, and then he didn't have time anymore, and I hope he comes back again. And we also had someone pop in for one session, share his work, and leave. So I would say that, like any group, you go through a lot of different stages, different ways of being there. But you'll hear more about what it meant for us to be in a writing group. And I think it's time for Lori to tell us about where we are today.
Well, I'm Gloria, and I'm just going to recap what we have gained from Nikkei Writers Now. And each of us, as you've already heard, have pretty much expressed what they have gained from this group. For me, I've gained a network of incredible women dedicated to telling their stories through writing. And this was echoed by Sarah when she shared that she has gained a community of fascinating, talented, generous writers who are brave enough to make themselves vulnerable by sharing their writing and their ideas. In addition, I'm also learning how to sharpen my own writing due to the time that we set aside for us to learn and share together through our monthly craft sessions. As you can already hear, we have a wide range of perspectives. And as Ellen summarized, each of us has our own individual perspective and experience of what it is to be Nikkei or to be connected to Nikkei culture and to share. So due to these varied perspectives, you can't help to learn from each other. For example, Ellen, who lives in Canada, has deepened her knowledge about the Japanese American experience of incarceration. Grace, who lives in California, is inspired by the stories of those of us who live in like Montana or the Midwest, the East Coast, because we're all exploring similar themes of identity, racism, and love in places which are very different from her West Coast Japanese American experience. Ellen noted that together we have created a supportive circle of writers. We encourage trust and support, and we help each other out by giving or arranging presentations regarding the craft of writing. And we also give constructive feedback from a wide range of perspectives, as I've already mentioned, on each other's writing. Members share drafts of the writing and they receive feedback that is thoughtful and constructive. And Lori noted that a learning is the fine art of supporting each other with straightforward, detailed observations and suggestions, along with genuine praise for what moves us. And both Elaine and Sarah have noted that they've just really appreciated the feedback that they have gotten. And in fact, Sarah mentioned that she's inspired not only by the feedback she gets, but by her fellow writers in this group because of our dedication to using our voices for good. Sarah also thought that the structure of our group has gotten her to write things she otherwise would not have written about. So it's kind of pushed her that way, and that's what she's gained. And she began a blog about her family stories. I personally think that what everyone has gained from this group, or the biggest gain from this Nikkei Writers Now, is that we affirm each other's identity as storytellers of the Nikkei experience. And that generates the feeling of genuine empowerment that is priceless. And it continues to be nurtured by this group and in this group. And with that, I will turn it over to Lori, who's going to share what we've given.
I'm learning so much by hearing everyone speak tonight. And that it really struck me that even though we've been together for 3 years, we're still learning about each other, because it took us the longest time to even know each other's last names, to know each other's phone numbers, to know where we all lived. And so it's been the writing first. And I think that that speaks to the biggest contribution that we each have made, which is being willing to take the risk of sharing it. It's also very practical in terms of prioritizing the days that we meet and the 90 minutes that we spend together, not chit-chatting and socializing, but actually working, to spend the time ahead of sessions to really look at the other person's work, to give it thought, to give it consideration, and to give that person the actual feedback, not just verbally, but in writing. That takes time. When we came up with the idea of having a craft session and sharing the facilitation, that's another leadership commitment that we've each made, and that rotates month by month. And the craft sessions have varied and are imaginative, and it can be all from one great book that someone has found. We can bring someone we know who does research and writing. I brought a photojournalist friend of mine who has an incredible story. So that's been, I think, another way of keeping our interactions with one another very vibrant and vitalized. I think it's important to let you know that we've extended grace to one another when someone hasn't been able to make the session, has to leave early, has to miss altogether, or come later, because life happens and we all know that. But in the end, there are at least a good number of people to carry on. So having the size group that we do is really manageable. And I think, yeah, we can wield and we can adapt. I think it's also important to say that we have shared our spirits and our hearts with one another. There have been times when we've cried, lots of laughter, big realizations. So yeah, there's no monetary cost that we've had to put out, but I think the other things I've touched on are priceless and key. Unless we all wanted to buy plane tickets and hang out with Elaine in her Santa Fe abode, that would affect our pocketbooks. And I would just like to also emphasize how important to me it is that Lisa is part of this group, who is not Nikkei, but who is so aligned in her heart and in her spirit with us, because I think that having non-Nikkei who really open themselves to the stories is a part of feeling heard fully. And then I also feel it's so important that we have Ellen, because it's very easy for us to be so US centric, and this experience goes even beyond North America to South America. And, you know, we are on the cusp of having new members who are from Japan. And so there are all kinds of ways for us to give and receive. Yeah. So who's next? Let's see. I think it's Sarah on nuts and bolts.
Yep. And actually, it's great because a question just came into the chat from Emily about nuts and bolts. And so hopefully I'll hit all the things. But if not, we're going to be having questions really soon, too. As you've heard, we have evolved, but the current structure we have is that we meet twice a month. We meet on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. And we meet from about 7 p.m. Eastern to 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We because we sometimes like to chat and we also want to really be using that hour and a half for work, we can get on early at like 6:45, 15 minutes before the start if we want to chat. That's sort of the way we have addressed that. And the first meeting, the second Tuesday, is a craft session, which as we've heard, we take turns leading, and we can have guest speakers. And the fourth Tuesday is the workshop, where the same person who has organized the craft session has also submitted their work for the fourth session to be workshopped. What we've come to is that we ask that the person who's going to be getting feedback submit by Wednesday or Thursday before the Tuesday of the workshop meeting. I know I have actually, sometimes been running late, and I've said, I'm really sorry, even if you don't get to read it, like, here it is. Elaine, who is so organized, often gets her stuff much earlier. And Elaine she is working on a book, so she's often is submitting, multiple chapters, outlines, lots of material. And so she gives more time for people to, to go through all that. Generally, we use Google Docs. We email them is the way we usually do it. We have had a Google Drive at points to where we were sharing some of our writing, but practically speaking, when we're sharing for a workshop, we usually just email it. That seems to work for us. Let's see. So it's also helpful when the person who's submitting for the workshop meeting gives some guidelines about what kind of feedback they're looking for. And maybe it's a question about, like, if a particular section is working. Sometimes I often am saying, oh, this is really rough, and then the rest of the group is really kind, and so instead of pointing out that it's like got grammatical errors, they focus on the ideas and help me, like, think about how to organize or like how to root the story I'm trying to tell, or how to develop it further. So there's definitely sensitivity to, like, what the writer needs in terms of the feedback that we give. Let's see. We give written feedback on the Google Docs, or some people I think use Word docs, but it's like transferable. And then also verbal feedback during the workshop meeting. And we definitely have, I think one of the main things that we've talked about a lot is just sort of like that sense of responsibility to each other. And there was a person who came once, got feedback, and then didn't come back, and that, I think, caused some hurt feelings. And so the way, we avoid that. Now, we're not totally closed. We have, like, people have reached out to us who found us in different ways, and then we sort of, like, see if we're a good fit. And we've had people like come and observe both a craft and a workshop session to see if they think that we're a good fit, but are very upfront about the expectations in terms of giving written and verbal feedback, organizing a month. And I will say, I just want to echo, like, there's been a tremendous amount of grace, and I have been on the receiving end of so much of it. I have, like, sending my daughter off to college, just a lot of stuff has come up in my life. And I'm so grateful that the group has not kicked me out many, many times. That it's been great that I can stay a part of this group. And I've even thought, because I really am, I think, the weak link, maybe at some point I'll ask if I can be like a, what's the word I'm looking at? Auditor, so that I'm not asking people for feedback if I'm not going to be able to give it. Because we do, it is a commitment. There is grace, but, also a sense of obligation. I think I answered most of the questions about nuts and bolts, but Lisa is now going to talk more about, like, how we continue to evolve and grow and be stable. And we will be around for questions. And I can put some stuff in the chat about those, like, our nuts and bolts, if people want to have that. So
Okay. We also have planned breakout sessions for you all in a little while, so you can talk to each other in smaller groups, and the panelists here will stay in the main meeting room, and you can pop out and ask us questions if you want, or we can connect in other ways afterwards. The main issue, I think, for our writing group is to figure out what are your visions, each of you in this group. What vision do you have? What values do you have? What are your goals and what are your priorities? Because there are always going to be differences between us, but what are the things you hold in common? And when you get into a group, well, you'll figure out your own way. But for us, we had to figure out how much commonality did we need in order to hold together as a group and be of use to each other and not harmful to each other, but able to enhance each other's writings. In our group, we have poet, blogger, documentarian, all sorts of genres, and we have a lot of variety. We decided that the genre difference was a strength. You in your own writing group might decide you want to focus on a particular genre. All poets, I was in a poetry writers group for a long time where we met every week. It was very rigorous and it was only poets, and that had its own strength. Here in this group, it's a variety, and we decided it worked for us. So, but the main thing that we keep in the forefront of our minds all the time and use for our goal and our time work is that our connections with each other around Nikkei culture and stories is our glue. We are all writers. We could write about all sorts of other things, but it's our Nikkei commonality that's our glue. And we hope to keep stability in this group so that we keep building trust and familiarity with each other's writing. So we can say to each other, oh, I remember you brought that up in this other piece you mentioned. Maybe they would, blend or something. So having a longitudinal view of each other's work, familiarity helps. And sharing responsibilities, as it has been mentioned. Elaine was a giant of keeping us together the first year, when we spent a lot of time chatting and talking, getting to know each other and doing writing prompts, and we hadn't quite gelled a format. And now, after 2 years, we kind of have a gelled format. I suggested the craft meeting split last year, and we tried it for a year. We'll probably have a discussion about whether that's working, whether we want to keep it going that way, whether we want to tweak it. For instance, I did the first craft session. I brought in Alden's book, The Emotional Craft of Fiction. It's not his book, but he suggested we write that, and it has writing prompts in it. So I brought that to the craft session. I thought, well, do we want to maybe work through this book during the year with writing craft? No, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to do a different craft thing each month, and each person take a month. So we had to be flexible as we evolved, and your groups, whatever group you form or are in, I suggest have a flexibility as things evolve. You may have different priorities come up. People might come to a point and say, we don't want the craft sessions anymore. We want to have more critique time. Or we're doing our own work, okay, we want to have more writing prompts. So things evolve. Main thing is to be responsible to each other, doing the critiques and readings in a timely manner. And it's already been mentioned about new members. I think the key, another key is to have a balance of what happens. Do we have enough critique time? For example, the way it works out, I actually have had only 1 hour of critique each year, because one month I was the chair for that month. if that's not enough for someone, then you just, get the group to tweak it a little bit. So main thing is just stay open to reevaluating as big questions come up.
I would like to ask your critique methodology and your etiquette regarding critiquing.
I think that's a great question. And I will say, quite honestly, I was nervous about it before we ever met and began doing it, because I'd been not in writing groups before, but in other types of groups where there were guides about how to express ideas, thoughts, feelings, reactions. And my recollection is that we really did not set any guidelines other than to be honest and to be constructive and to be supportive. And we start, and I'd love it for the rest of you to help me with this, but we start with what has really moved us, what we've really liked. And we're very, very specific about it. We'll talk about this phrase, this sentence, this image, this word, which is so exhilarating to hear as the writer. And then everyone takes a turn doing that, and we build on each other's comments. I often come to new thoughts as I'm hearing other members of the group give feedback. And I've marked up, the piece with my own notes, and then we do another round of where something feels either confusing or unfinished, unclear, not quite in sync, could be a whole nother chapter and not part of this. And we share those ideas pretty honestly and in detail. Again, I think the detail is what is so helpful. Saying to someone that I really loved it, I enjoyed it, doesn't mean nearly as much as knowing what exactly did you love and what exactly did you enjoy, what really stuck with you.
The beauty of a Nikkei group is that we have this experience, right? And shared background. So I was writing, one of my characters swore a lot. Was like a dock worker, except he was a farmer. And Grace said, I've never heard Nisei talk that way, and it was a good process check because she was speaking from her experience and I was writing from my experience, but I wanted, of course, you want your characters to be real as possible. And so it was really great feedback because our experiences were different. And to have that input was really important to validate what I was writing about. And that indeed, some of those guys, that generation, could swear like dock workers, but they didn't at home or around the kids, maybe. I think he did around my mom. But anyway, that was really helpful to have that perspective.
I'd echo the specificity that Lori mentioned is really helpful. For instance, in one of my biographical sections, someone talking, I say that someone's aunt was incinerated in Hiroshima. And the group said, hey, wait, I'm not sure about that word. And I went back and I double checked, and that is exactly the word that the family uses when they talk about that particular aunt. So I had a fact check sort of thing because someone pointed out a particular word that bothered them.
in terms of like more craft kinds of feedback that we give each other, we all have different levels of experience, and so we're going to have different craft feedback that we can give. But I think it has just worked out that we can complement each other by what we have to offer. Like I come from a magazine background, and so I often will give like I don't know, a little like word level edits, like how you could tighten something. But I always, in the notes, in the written notes, say like, take it or leave it, like this is your piece, so whatever sounds right to you. I have like some of our group members are really great at like giving you a whole new way of organizing your work, and that has been a huge gift to me. But I think it's just been like sort of lucky and organic how we represent different sort of strengths and that add up to a good whole in offering each other feedback.
I want to say, in addition to that, I think everyone in our group are readers. So when we're looking, we have this, even though we didn't consciously group it, we have this whole collection of what writing is, good writing is. So, it's just part of being a writer that you read. And I feel like, for me, that's like great feedback, because I feel like whoever is reading my piece is reading it like a reader would read a piece of published work, and they're giving me that feedback, and they have this fountain of knowledge because they have done a lot of reading themselves. Yeah. I like the questions most of all, because that points out what doesn't make sense, where we need more clarity. And in a way, it is one of the most frightening things, but in the end, it turns out to be very supportive and very satisfying, both giving feedback and receiving feedback.
Yeah, Grace, thank you
Great.
for saying that. Can I just jump in and add one thing about Japanese terminology when it's been used in different people's pieces? We've had some really good conversations about whether the word needs to be defined, whether there needs to be a footnote, whether there needs to be more context so that it can be understood. And what's, I think, been fascinating to me is all of our different levels of familiarity with the Japanese language, and how many words many of us grew up hearing and knowing, and then how many words somebody knows but nobody else has heard and known. So that's been a nice feature of being Nikkei and Nikkei aligned, Nikkei proximity.
Great.
Thank-
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you next
May the
time.
muse be with you. Happy writing. I want to read it
Thank
all.
you.